Welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show with local and national thought leaders discussing issues impacting the Black community. Now introducing our host, Miss Ann Marie Sorrell.
Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders. I'm your host, Ann Marie Sorrell, President and CEO of the Mosaic Group. We're your premier advertising, marketing, and public relations firm here in South Florida. I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to join us today. But before we get started with our broadcast, I want to thank our sponsors for making this broadcast possible. So thank you to Domestic Mendover Accident Attorneys, AARP, the Florida Lottery, FAMU Mary, and All of Us Research Program at the University of Miami. Today, I am joined by a very special guest to talk about a serious and very important topic. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Victor B. Williams. He's an internationally renowned and respected human trafficking advocate and the founder and president and CEO of Quest to Freedom. Welcome, Victor.
Hey, Ann Marie, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're going to get right to it because I think we just have a ton to talk about. But before we get into our questions, I want to just do a quick little overview, which you'll tell us a lot more about your journey, but just want to let everyone know who you are here. You're retired from law enforcement with over 34 years of domestic and international experience. And in 1991, you joined the U.S. Customs Service, which later became the Department of Homeland Security. And in February 2011, you were assigned to DHS Homeland Security Investigations, Special Agent in charge of the Miami's Office Human Trafficking Group. And in 2012 was appointed the coordinator of the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force until your retirement in 2018. So let's talk about just your, briefly tell me more about your background. And of course, you worked in this area, but what made it become your passion to now be this advocate of human trafficking?
Yes. So I was assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force when I had the opportunity to go to Botswana. And I was the coordinator at the International Law Enforcement Academy in Botswana, Africa. When I got my first lesson or a course about human trafficking, and when I heard the word modern day slavery, and being an African American, the word slavery shocked me. And so I learned, and we'll come back later to talk about there's some thoughts that I didn't have because of culture. So when I got back to the States, my time was up with the FBI. I go back to Homeland Security and I get assigned to the Human Trafficking Group. I sit next to this gentleman that has a case of about 8 women that were being trafficked from Mexico. Speed the case up. These women were saying they weren't trafficked, and then we found out that it was one of the women in the group that was part of the trafficking family, keeping these women afraid. Once we pulled them out, they all said what we knew what was true, and so the guys pled, and now we're at sentencing. And this is what did it for me. One of the women that got up to give her impact statement talked about they took her at the age of 14. They trafficked her for 12 years. And she was brought over here to serve the men that work in the fields and homestead, picking the fruits and vegetables that we eat. These men didn't go home, take a shower, put on cologne, and go visit this woman at a trailer. They left the dirty fields where she was there to serve 15 to 25 guys a day. And that was not sex. So basically she was raped 15 to 25 times a day by these men leaving the dirty fields, and just seeing her fight and say to them, what you did to me was wrong. I knew at that moment I was going to be working in this space for the rest of my life.
That just made my whole stomach sink with you sharing that, just the thought of what this woman went through. Take us through, because we hear the word and people in the community may or may not be familiar with what human trafficking actually is and what it entails. Kind of take us through what that actually means and what it entails. You just shared a very, I don't even know what to say about the story you just shared. It's like no words for it. But take us through that.
Sometimes I get emotional when I remind myself of how I got here. But real quick, I give you, human trafficking laws in the United States came about in the year 2000 when the United Nations was in Palermo, Italy, and charged all nations to address this issue. So we came up with the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. It's made some changes over the years, but in that act, we define human trafficking by 3 words: force, fraud, and coercion. You need one of those elements to have a trafficking case, right? But if you're a child, you do not need any of those elements. That means there were no such thing as the word child prostitution after those laws came out. It's been taking so many years for culture to catch up with the law. So force, fraud, or coercion are the elements. You don't need, if you're under the age of 18, it doesn't apply to you. And I know there's another question about the 3 Ps. So basically that is human trafficking in a nutshell with the elements. And there's some other things in there that says if you're transporting, holding people, any support you give to anybody in that space, you can be charged with human trafficking.
Thank you for breaking that down with the technical definitions. Now, what are some of the strategies or tactics that are used by human traffickers?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that trafficking is the result of a lot of things that already went wrong in somebody's life. I talk about trauma, generational trauma, unresolved trauma creates vulnerabilities, and that's what traffickers look to exploit. They look to exploit vulnerable people. And so again, it goes back to family. I tell you, human trafficking victims are created at home, and everybody hates the trafficker, but I have to tell you, the trafficker comes from the same family that the victims come from, because you got to ask yourself, what happened to a human being to treat another human being that way?
That's a good point. So, I've watched some movies. Trafficked was one of them. And I think oftentimes we don't realize what's happening right in our neighborhoods and our communities. Like you just mentioned, what happened in Homestead, right? Oftentimes human trafficking, or historically, it's been perceived as an international issue, especially when you see movies that, you see women from different countries that are being trafficked, through different countries. So it's looked at as an international issue, or it's also looked at as, they're trafficking or kidnapping white girls. But, is that a false narrative? And if it is not a false narrative, or if it is, how has this changed over the years? And how is this now impacting the Black community?
Well, one thing I must say, everybody is subject to being a victim. It has a color. It's like cancer. Cancer don't care if you're white, black, purple, or green, rich or poor. But let me go back, because I failed to give you another definition. There are 4 types of human trafficking. There's sex trafficking, labor trafficking, servitude/debt bondage, and organ trafficking. So when we see sex trafficking, people, when they think about human trafficking, they think, oh, there has to be a movement across the border. A lot of times we think people are coming from somewhere else. But when we look at sex trafficking, the majority of those victims are American citizens. You could be born in Miami and trafficked in Miami. But when we look at labor trafficking, we see the majority of those victims are people from another country, because what they're exploiting is their status, legal, illegal, using their not ignorance, I don't want to say, but their lack of knowledge of American laws. So to answer your question, yeah, it affects everyone. There's no color, although you can say, who are people that are most likely vulnerable to this. You could say in America, yeah, that's the Black community, but what we're learning, everybody is subject to being a victim of human trafficking.
Now, you talked about sex and labor. What was the other 2 were?
Servitude/debt bondage, and then organ trafficking.
What is servitude/debt bondage? Can you?
So I'm a rich guy, and I got a maid working for me, and I'll give you some examples that we've had cases like this in Miami, and when I was an agent. Someone rich brings somebody in from another country to help them with their kids, work as their maid. They get worked over hours and hours. They're enslaved. They don't get paid. They're treated like crap. And this is something at this point that I want to educate your listeners to, because a lot of times when people come from other countries, legal or illegal, the first thing people would do is take their documents out of the guy's, I'm responsible for you. So I have to hold your passport. That is against the law. You can't take anybody's documents for that reason. But they do that, and because of the lack of knowledge of law, people fall into it. Because understand this, if I'm a trafficker, the first thing I'm going to take from you are your documents. Why? Because you can't get on a bus, plane, or train, and you can't get a job, and I can't identify you. So I just took away your way of getting out, making a living, and when we do find you, it makes it very difficult for us to identify you because you don't have proper documents.
Wow, talk about taking away someone's freedom. Yes. Without putting them in prison. They're like in a different type of bondage, a different type of prison. Wow. And can you touch on organ trafficking?
So up until the other night, I was under the impression that we don't have that problem here, because over my 30-something years of working in law enforcement, I've never known any of my colleagues to have an organ trafficking case. But I was sitting on another program the other day where I was sitting with some people. I don't want to call out names because I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody. But let's just say there's certain part of our communities, again, foreigners, that come here. They don't speak the language very well. They don't know the laws and their rights very well. And their loved ones end up in a hospital. They show up, and all of a sudden they're being told, oh, your loved one is brain dead and we're removing their organs. Now, I am always learning in this space. It's never not a time that I think I know it all. This was shocking to me because it's almost like in a legal setting. It's not like you see in a movie, you're out, somebody drug you, you wake up in a bathtub, you're bleeding and you're cut open and your liver or something is missing. This is people going to hospitals, not knowing their rights, and somebody telling them, oh, your loved one is brain dead, so we're going to remove their organs. And they don't know that they have the rights to say, oh, no, you can't do that. I ain't calling out any hospitals, but that was shocking. And I think that's something that we have to start looking into.
And it's interesting you say that, because I had a friend tell me a couple years back, like, remove organ donor from your driver's license.
Yeah, that's what the person told me.
And I was like, why? And they were like, well, if for any reason you ever got into an accident or anything, and you have organ donor, it's and they need to save a life, then they'd probably not try to keep you alive because they want the organs for whatever reason. And I just thought that was so unethical, and I'm like, you can't be serious, right? But just based on what you just explained, even if you're not a immigrant and someone that's vulnerable, but if you may have something as simple as organ donor on your driver's license that identifies that you're willing to give up your organs, you could become part of the vulnerable.
When I was listening to this person say that, because I do have organ donor, on my driver's license, and I didn't think about that. That's what I'm saying. I live in a space where I'm constantly trying to learn. That was shocking to me, and in a somewhat legal way. Some hospital. Again, I ain't calling out no names or anything, but I'm just telling people to look more into this. I just try to educate people, bring awareness, so they're making better decisions in their lives.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the 4 Ps of anti-trafficking. Tell us what they are and what they mean to us in this community?
So when the United Nations got together and charged all countries to deal with human trafficking, they somewhat addressed the 3 Ps. We make it 4 Ps. And the 3 Ps are protection, prosecution, and prevention. Those are the 3 Ps really that the United Nations charge all countries to deal with. And our State Department does a trafficking in persons report every year, where we do a report charging, grading all countries, how do they deal with the 3 Ps. If you're 1 P, if you're tier 1, meaning you're addressing all 3 Ps, you're doing well. A lot of countries fell in the prosecution part, so they end up with 2 Ps. They might be doing prevention and protection, but they're failing in the prosecution part. If you're a tier 3, your country is probably part of the problem. But where the 4th P comes in place, we realize that no one operates in this space alone. Law enforcement have their lane, service providers have their lanes, educators have their lanes, advocates. So partnership is the key. And that's how, when I was working for Homeland Security, that's pretty much how we looked at it. We addressed it by the victim-centered, trauma-informed approach. And we looked at the partnerships that we have with people in the community to help address this problem.
So I want to go through them a little bit more, if you don't mind. With prevention, and I want to prevention and protection, right? I know that there are things that different organizations such as yours, which we'll get to because I want to hear more about your organization specifically. But there are other organizations, and of course, there are governmental campaigns and airports. And, I see the signs when I'm traveling in different airports, train stations, et cetera. But how do we expand that prevention into communities and individuals?
Well, you're doing it right now. A lot of people don't know that this month is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, which is sad. Because prevention is all about education and awareness. That's prevention. That's where we start. So yeah, that's what you're doing right now. This is part of prevention.
Awesome. And in protection, is that just more on the law enforcement side, or because I remember watching Trafficked, and there was like a social worker who was a part of the trafficking ring.
Yes.
And she would get the young ladies that were aging out of foster care and tell them that they were going to go get an education and whatever. And the next thing you know, they're in a van and they're being transported to another place, another country, et cetera. So where does the protection lie? Is it just in the hands of law enforcement, or do other organizations and agencies have a role to play in protection?
Well, you saw that in the But if you go back and look at some records here with Miami-Dade, that was a real case. There were actually someone working in that system that was trafficking a young woman. So the protection is all about all of us. It's law enforcement, it's service providers. It's when we find out that someone is caught up in that situation, all of us should be on board with giving that person some type of protection. And it's still education. When we talk about victim-centered, trauma-informed, there was a time as I was learning through this process, and I would hear a law enforcement guy say to me, "Oh, they're not a real victim because they're not cooperating with my investigation." Well, you're not properly educated in this space of protection. Victims are dealing with heavy doses of trauma on trauma on trauma, whether you're labor trafficking or sex, especially sex. Every time you have sex, that's not sex, it's rape. So we live in a culture that we expect people to act the way we want them to act as victims. That's what we build. And so culture is everything. And that's one of the things my organization does. We educate to deal with the culture so that we see the truth of the matter and not what we think it's supposed to be. So protection is not just law enforcement. Protection is all of us, service providers, our families, our neighbors. Anybody that recognizes somebody in that space, we should be trying to help them get services that can help them regain their lives back.
Well, I want to share a little story, and I don't know what was happening, right? Because I want people to understand just being aware of our own surroundings, right? And I remember one morning I was driving on a particular street downtown, and this was a few years back, downtown West Palm, and I was looking for a business event I was going to or something. So, anyways, I got on another street and I saw these young ladies kind of lined up in front of this weird looking building. A couple of guys out on their phone. But the girls, they looked kind of like runaway type girls and they just didn't look safe, if that made sense.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's strange. So I kind of doubled back around, and most of them had gone into said building. And the guys were still kind of lurking outside on the phone and, one paying attention to the girls or whatever, but it felt very eerie. It didn't feel like it was a good situation, so I did call some representatives at the city and was kind of like, well, I think y'all may want to check this street in this particular building out just to see if it's, some legit business going on there, but, and I don't know what the outcome was. I don't, honestly, but I think that it triggered something in me to want to at least have someone professionally look into it a little bit more. So in case there were girls being trafficked or abused or whatever, coerced into something that they didn't want to be in, that hopefully it could have been addressed. And so I tell that story so that if anyone is listening and you're, paying attention to the environment, paying attention to parking lots. And Victor, I want you to talk about some of the other things that are happening that are really scary, because yes, there are the vulnerable persons who may be, a part of different systems or whatever. However, they're just women who are going for a jog, or men or going for a jog or kids that are walking home from school, or you're going shopping for groceries and some car pulls up and try to snatch you. So can you talk about kind of the snatch and grab that's been happening as well?
Listen, you got a lot there. Listen, I live in a space right now that the closer I am to myself, I trust my instincts. And the more that we're in tune with ourselves, the more our instincts speak to us, right? And I tell people, your instincts are 90% of the times right. So I try to create part of Quest of Freedom. We're going to have an app that we say, listen, I don't want people running in endangering their lives, but what I want you to do is be a good witness. If you see something, I would rather you call and that could have been a movie shoot, and let it be a movie shoot than you not do anything and find out later that all those girls were trafficked and you could have done something. Err on the side of caution. Call the police. They may not even know what to do sometimes, because this is all about changing culture from law enforcement to our elected leaders, so that we all address this properly. If you felt something was wrong, it probably was wrong. Now, I have a 30-year-old daughter. All my life, I've been telling her, you know what? If somebody snatch and grab you, fight it out. Because you know what? You probably end up in a situation that you wish you were dead, or you're going to die anyway. And I hate to be groomy, and I'm just giving the facts. Fight it out. I've seen recordings where 3-year-olds refuse to be taken. 12-year-olds refuse to be taken. Now, sometimes you're just going to be overpowered and taken, but fight it out. Be aware of your surroundings. And another thing that we do in culture is we victim blame. Why did you go down that alley? It doesn't matter what we do. It only matters where we are, and can we make the decisions to leave and get out of it when we want to. It doesn't matter how we got into it. So we have to stop the culture of victim blaming. So there's been a lot of things about wire ties on your door, picking up money. I haven't seen any of these things result into cases, but I'm not doubting it. When I was early in my career, when I was driving go-fast boats chasing drug smugglers, every time we found out a way that the people were bringing in drugs, they had 10 others in their back pockets, right? So to answer that question, be aware, educate yourself, work as a team. You're going for it, do your research. Just don't show up at some place because you read something in the newspaper. Do your research. Tell people where you're going. And while we're on this subject, the one thing, while it's in my mind, I tell all parents, the best thing that parents can do these days is to have a relationship with their children, that their children can tell them the worst thing in the world that's going on. Yeah, I want you to cut the grass, make your bed, wash those dishes. But it can't be to the point where I drive a wedge that you don't trust me and can't talk to me, because a lot of kids are out there, and if they can't talk to their parents, who do they talk to?
No, and you touched on some really good things, and let's highlight a few of those points even more, Victor. The being aware of your surroundings. There's so many people, these earphones, these earbuds, these noise cancellation earplugs that are in. Yeah. I mean, from crossing the street to just sitting, they're not paying, and these are adults and children, right? They're not paying attention. They can't hear, so you can't hear anybody coming behind you, next to you, anything. So I really want to encourage people to really be careful with those earphones and the noise cancellation earphones. And, if you have one in, like when I go walking, yes, I have one, and I have one ear open, one earbud in. I don't put both in because I need to be, right. I need to hear a car coming, number one, and I need to hear what else is happening. Even though I'm walking in my neighborhood, which is usually pretty safe, right? Yeah. But just for me personally, I think the other thing for people that go to these model shoots and actor casting calls and things like that, just as you said, you got to do your research. You got to know exactly, is this a legit agency, legit call, or are you being lured into something? And then the last thing, Victor, I want to touch on online dating. Online dating apps. I don't know if you can mention anything to that in your experience, and if that has played a role in trafficking at all.
Well, yeah, it does. Some people are trafficked on those online dating apps, to be, honest. But I would say to that, if you're on an online dating app, meet people in public. Let people know where you're going. I'm a single guy. If I met someone and they ask me for some personal information so they can feel safe, I'll give it to them, because I'm not trying to make anybody feel unsafe. I'm so weird that I don't even ask anybody for numbers. If you feel like you want to, give me I'll call you, but I'm weird in that way of being protective, of people, so if you're on an online dating app, just try to get as much information as you can about an individual, get their real names, Google them. Everybody think it's weird because you're Googling them. I'm Googling everybody. I want to know who you are. I want to know as much who you are when I show up. And you know what? If they got a problem with it, that means they may have something to hide. So you don't need to be hanging out with them anyway. I'm not going to give you my bank account number, but I ain't going to give you information to like go open up an account, but I want people to feel safe, and men should feel that way. Women should feel that way, so.
I agree. I asked for a copy of your driver's license. Might be pushing it, but, and I've had some people tell me like, no, that's personal. I'm like, yeah, but you could be crazy. You could be a stalker. I need to look you up. I need to know that's your real name. Not saying you can't have fake driver's license, but, taking those precautionary steps for all my single folks out there that participate in online dating. But that's a whole nother conversation that Victor and I can have a whole nother show on.
Yes, we could.
So Victor, let's talk about, as we wind down, let's talk more about Quest to Freedom, what it is that your organization specifically does. How does someone that's interested in getting involved in, the advocacy of anti-human trafficking, or involved with your organization, like let's talk about that.
So when I retired in 2018, I bought the domain Quest of Freedom to educate and be, do what I was already doing as the coordinator of the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, working in communities, educating communities. But life had me go on other areas, and I needed to go in those other areas because now I am back. I am in the space that I'm supposed to be, and I'm focused. Quest of Freedom is an anti-cultural awareness, education, advocate organization that we work on donations and grants to be able to help victims in the immediate situation. Because I've been the coordinator of the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force. When I retired, I ended up at one point in my life being the coordinator, the human trafficking coordinator for the entire state of Georgia. And so I've seen a lot of organizations come and go. I've seen organizations, they're ready to help, but I can't help you right now. But if you can give me a day or let a bed clear or, and I've seen organizations step in and like, we could get you a couple of days in a hotel. We can get you a plane ticket. We want to be able to respond to victims in the immediate response until we can get them where they need to go. But our main thing is awareness, cultural awareness, letting everybody know that we're all responsible. Because you can say to yourself, and this is no disrespect to certain industries that are legal, but if I don't go to strip clubs and I don't buy prostitutes and I don't deal in that area of sex trafficking, and I don't have any kids, why should I be concerned? Well, you know what? We all have cell phones. We all buy products. And if we're buying products from slave labor, we're all part of the problem. And that's including me. So one of the things that we're doing is there is a movement already, but I want to give people tangible things that they can do. When I used to do my presentations, I used to say, now that you know, what are you going to do about it? Now I'm giving you something to do. If you eat chocolate, just chocolate. If you drink coffee, all we're asking for you is to fair trade it. Go online, put in fair trade, see if the products that you're buying are fair trade. Because if you're buying chocolates that are not fair traded, most likely your chocolate starts on the west coast of Africa with a soul child picking a cocoa bean. You can fact check me on that by Googling the dark side of chocolate. So nobody really wants to be involved or buying products because it's cheap if it's going to be to the cost of somebody else's detriment, right? But we do. But we can do that. So imagine in a year or two, if we see, fair trade chocolate up here and the other chocolates down there, and then you can look in the mirror and say, you know what? I changed the world today. I played a part in making a difference in the world. And hopefully we educate all of us on all these products and then force our government to make sure that people that are doing business with us, from the beginning of a product's made till it comes into our house, we buy it, that whole chain, everybody got treated fairly, everybody got paid properly.
Wow, you just said a whole lot, Victor. And let me ask you, on your website, do you have like a list of products we should avoid buying? Or is there a site that has, of course we can look up fair trade, but are there other sites that tell us what to also avoid with these companies that are not doing business properly?
We are a month and a half in this, so our website is still being, processed. We're trying to start out with a good foundation and make sure that the stuff that we put on our website are facts, true. But you can Google, there is Fair Trade America. I don't work for them. I'm not partnered with them, but I started doing that because I can't tell other people to do it. So I'm taking some of these steps on my own and learn as I go myself. So you have to Google your products, and note this. You can go out and get that fake Fendi bag or whatever, but note, that's probably a human trafficking situation just so somebody can look good. Because you know what? It's against the law for us to buy fake, for anyone to sell fake products. Oh my God. So, it's definitely, if you're buying this product, you can't think that people are making false products. You got a 401 plan. You got an insurance policy. You getting paid a proper salary. You got to think about it in that way, because nobody cares unless it's your family being affected or someone you love.
Right, absolutely. Well, Victor, I know we're winding down on time. We can talk about this probably for another hour if we had that kind of time.
Yes.
How does someone get in touch with you? And do you have any other information that you want to share, or any final takeaway that you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, I just say, if you go to questofreedom.org, there's a form that you can fill out. Eventually, we're going to start having Zoom calls, as we get a number of people, because I get a lot of people, how can I help? How can I help? And I would just tell people, educate yourself. Don't take a one-time human trafficking course and leave it for yourself. It does no one any good. If you have the information, share it with your family, share it with your community. The more we know and the more we are in numbers, the stronger we are. And stand by, because there are going to be some things that we're going to just ask people to do. Volunteering, this is my purpose and passion, and I'm going global. I want to change lives. And again, when we work in this space, the one thing that I got to tell people, we don't save lives, but we can be vehicles. And when people are ready for the help they need, we can be vehicles to help them get there. Fire departments pull people out of buildings, that's saving a life. Coast Guard pulling somebody out of a drowning boat, that's saving a life. But in this aspect, we don't save lives, but we want to be able to help people get their lives back and be a vehicle for that when they're ready.
Well, thank you so much, Victor, and all the work that you're doing, bringing this information. This is such an important topic. Yes.
I got two real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Space don't mention this, but our LGBTQ plus community, we really need to do more support there. And I'm going to bring up a topic that nobody is called benefit fraud. Our elderly community being frauded for their Social Security check, our VA, our vets being frauded for their, VA checks. People supposed to take care of them, but they're taking that money and treating these people like really bad. So please keep those two communities in your mind and your heart when you address this issue.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. This was such a much needed conversation. Definitely appreciate you, Victor, and all the work. Of course, here at Legacy MIA Media Group, we are here to continue supporting you in any way that we can possible. So please keep us posted on the different efforts, as well as the ways that people can get involved. And just stay with me for a moment as I make a few quick announcements. I want to thank our sponsors again, the Mesman and Dover Accident Attorneys, AARP, the Florida Lottery, FAMU Mary, and All of Us Research Program at the University of Miami. Again, if you heard last week, I'm going to remind you again to save the date, February 18th. We have the Legacy Brunch and Fashion Show at Le Meridian in Dania Beach, where we are honoring South Florida's most influential women in business and industry. You don't want to miss that. We want to make sure we give the ladies their flowers at this event. And congratulations to all of the honorees from Miami to Palm Beach County. Congratulations, ladies. Please be sure to watch all of our shows. We have something for everyone. Monday is the Business of Black Business at 1 p.m. with Jay Reynolds. Tuesday, My Money, Your Money at 7 p.m. with Bridgette Lumpkins. Wednesday, Soul at 7 p.m. with Nikki Jellin. And Thursday is Lunch with Legacy Leaders with yours truly at noon, and Flavor of South Florida with Chef Irie at 7 p.m. And on Fridays, Black Health with Dr. Michelle Kerwin. Please remember to share this video, mark your calendar, and tune in with us next Thursday at noon. And thank you again, Victor, for being with us. And thank you for sharing your afternoon with us, everyone. Please share this video. Very important information. Have a wonderful day, everyone.